Donkey Kong Country is considered by many to be one of the greatest video games of all time, and for good reason. Thanks to its groundbreaking graphics, fun and exciting level design, and bump-in music, the game sold over 9 million copies worldwide, making it the third best-selling game for Nintendo's Super Nintendo Entertainment System, second only to Super Mario World and Super Mario All-Stars, both developed in-house by Nintendo. However, Donkey Kong Country was developed by Rareware, a name I'm sure most of you are familiar with today, but at the time, Rare's big titles included Battletoads and Jeopardy for the NES. Alright, that's probably a bit of an over-exaggeration, but in my opinion, it was the success of the Donkey Kong Country series that paved the way for Rare's future classics like Banjo-Kazooie and GoldenEye 007. Now, as you may have already heard, recently Nintendo added the original Donkey Kong Country for the SNES to the Nintendo Switch Online service. I played Donkey Kong Country as a kid, but never fully beat the game, so I thought since it's on Switch now, and seeing as I'm a huge Rare fan, this would be the perfect opportunity to give it another shot. And while I'm at it, I figured it'd be fun to do a little bit of a retrospective type review for it as well, so without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, first off, let's talk about the first thing most people notice when booting up a game, the visuals. Now, as I stated before, Donkey Kong Country's graphics were truly groundbreaking for the time. Using pre-rendered 3D models compressed to work as SNES sprites was a novel idea, and really makes the game stand out from the crowd in my opinion. That being said, I never really cared for the model they decided to go with for Donkey Kong. Those skinny legs always remind me of the old Donkey Kong animated series.
That's Donkey Kong, the strongest, brawniest, hippest ape in all of Congo Bongo. Our protector and future king. Got a lot of muscle mass, but not so much brain mass.
Luckily, this is only really an issue when Donkey Kong stands upright to do his victory dance, so for the most part, he looks just fine. Moving on to our other main playable character, making his debut appearance in Donkey Kong Country, we have Diddy Kong, and he looks just as great as ever. You really have to give credit to Rare's team for making such an iconic design that will be used time and time again for games like Smash, Mario Party, and of course the newer Donkey Kong games. He fits perfectly in Nintendo's worlds, but still has that Rare flair with his trademark red hat and tank top, just an overall great design. Diddy Kong has always been and will always be one of my personal favorite Nintendo characters. In addition to Diddy Kong, we have a few other newcomers to the Kong clan, namely Funky Kong, Cranky Kong, and Candy Kong, all very unique designs that you won't soon forget. Funky Kong's cool server design in particular seems to be very popular, even warranting him being brought back as a playable character in the new Donkey Kong Country games as well as even Mario Kart Wii. When you run into him in the game, you can ride his funky airliner to move quickly between levels you've already visited, which can come in pretty handy. Cranky Kong is that classic old man character who can't go 5 seconds without telling you a story about him in the old days. Whenever you run into him, he always bonks Donkey Kong on the head with his cane while he gives him a lecture, which honestly in my opinion makes him a very funny and likable character. On the other hand, we have Candy Kong. Personally, I've never been a fan of the design for Candy. I feel like they couldn't decide if they wanted to go more humanoid or more monkey and ended up with the worst of both worlds. It just makes her uncomfortable to look at in my opinion. But I can't help but be overjoyed when I finally get to save my progress thanks to her save points, which is enough to make me forget about the grossly unsettling design. But enough about the characters, now it's time to talk about the world we're placed in when we first start our adventure in Donkey Kong Country. As you'd expect, we start out in Congo Jungle, but it isn't so much over rolling through pyramids, slipping through ice-covered caverns, and swimming through deep blue seas. There really is such great variation in the levels we find ourselves in, which makes for a much more unique and fun experience. As far as I can tell, the backgrounds, like the character models, are for the most part 3D pre-rendered graphics, and of course they look great. Vibrant colors and excellent art direction, along with more of that Rare flavor, really make for some memorable levels. I'm particularly fond of the snow and jungle levels myself because I think they just look the nicest and lend themselves well to the SNES's graphical capabilities. The pyramid and mineshaft levels look nice too in my opinion, but the colors can be a little one note. As far as my least favorite levels go, I'd have to say I didn't personally care for the more drab utilitarian type levels like the factory ones. I just don't like that messy metal look they went for, but I can't say they actually looked bad. They remind me a lot of Clanker's Cavern from Banjo-Kazooie or Frantic Factory from Donkey Kong 64. Now that I think about it, a lot of rare platformers have a level or two with this same rusty metal aesthetic. I've personally never been a huge fan of them, but I do appreciate the variation they provide. Now as for enemies, we have very varied designs with things like bees, bipedal crocodiles, and even beavers, not to mention the bosses. The enemies are the place that I think Rare would have had the most freedom in their designs because they weren't based on existing Nintendo characters, and that really shows. If you ever played Banjo-Kazooie or Conker's Bad Fur Day in particular, you'll instantly recognize those big cartoony eyes. Just overall very fun and memorable designs all around. Now there are of course some recolors of the same enemies, the Crocs in particular, which is a little unfortunate, but this may have been due to the limited storage space available on an SNES cartridge, at the most only going up to 6 megabytes. My personal favorite enemies are definitely the beavers. I love the way they waddle around everywhere, and you have to admit they look downright adorable. So Donkey Kong Country does have a story, but it definitely isn't the main focus here. In short, the Kong's bananas were stolen by King K. Rool and his lackeys, so we have to fight and platform our way through the many levels of the game while beating bosses and taking back our bananas. That's it. Rare never really was one to go into elaborate stories with their platformers, which I think is just fine. Just enough story to give us a reason to play through the many fun and exciting levels they designed for us is just the right amount. Okay, but enough about the story. Let's move on to the meat of the experience, the gameplay. As you probably already noticed based on the background video, Donkey Kong Country is a 2D side-scrolling platform-style game, similar to a lot of games that were coming out around the same time, like Aladdin or Super Mario World. The controls are pretty straightforward platformer controls, roll with Y and jump with B. Also much like in Super Mario, you can of course run by holding down the Y button. You can also perform a literal ground pound by pressing Y while stationary, but only as Donkey Kong. There is one more slightly more advanced technique, which is that if you roll off a ledge, you can then jump out of that roll, gaining a little more distance. This technique was most likely intentional on the part of the developers, as there are several instances of things like barrels that can only be reached by performing a jump out of a roll. Speaking of barrels, this is probably a good time to mention another major mechanic of Donkey Kong Country, the barrel cannons. These barrels, when entered, will, as the name implies, shoot you out at high speeds. There are two types of barrel cannons, those that will automatically launch you, and those that you can choose the timing of the launch. The combination of the two makes for some very fast-paced and interesting level design. In addition to the barrels, we have a myriad of other devices that help make the levels of Donkey Kong Country more fun and varied, like tires, minecarts, and conveyor belts. We can even find and ride various animal friends that provide different kinds of movement to help us progress through the level. I never really found myself needing these animals, but it was always a nice surprise when I ran into one. Like most 2D side-scrollers, the goal of the game is to get to the exit of each level, allowing us to progress further through the worlds, of which Donkey Kong Country has 7. However, in most cases this is easier said than done, which leads us to our next major topic, difficulty. I'll be honest, Donkey Kong Country kicked my butt. It is by no means an easy game. You're gonna die a lot. But that's okay. The fun of Donkey Kong Country, in my opinion, comes from slowly getting better and better at each level, eventually being able to almost beat them with your eyes closed. The sense of achievement when you finally clear a level you've been stuck on forever is awesome. However, there is a small problem with this approach in that, in classic retro game fashion, we are given a limited number of lives, and when you run out of lives, you're kicked back to the last save point you used, which means you're probably going to have to replay a lot of levels you already cleared. This is probably the worst part about the game, but lives and save points were the industry standard at the time, so you really can't blame Rare for using them here as well. Just remember to save as much as possible, and you really won't have too much trouble. As I mentioned before, there are two playable characters, Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong, that are on screen at the same time. However, when you take a hit from an enemy, your current Kong runs away, leaving you with just the other, so in essence we have just 2 hit points. There are plenty of opportunities to recover the other Kong through the use of DK barrels, so you're not stuck with just 1 hit point if you do get hit once, which does help make the game a little easier to progress through. However, if you fall down a hole, you don't come back and start from your last checkpoint down 1 life. So sometimes it pays to take a hit to avoid falling and losing a precious life. This especially came into play during the conveyor belt levels. I often found myself taking hits from flying enemies just to make it back to my platform. As for the boss fights, there really isn't much to say. Just jump on them 5 times and it's over. Other than K. Rool, there really aren't any bosses to write home about. Maybe the barrel guy, just because he uses a different tactic to the rest, making you fight through 5 different waves of increasingly strong enemies, but that still isn't very exciting. Not the worst bosses in the world, but not the best either. King K. Rool, on the other hand, is a really good fight in my opinion, making you constantly learn and adapt to his varying moves. Much like progressing through the levels of Donkey Kong Country, fighting K. Rool took many attempts, making me gradually get used to his fighting tactics. I had that same sense of achievement I've been feeling after clearing difficult levels when I finally figured out how to get past that annoying hop attack he does. The win condition here is the same as the other bosses in that you have to jump on his head, but this time there are several more phases, each more difficult than the last. Overall, a very fun and challenging final boss fight. Okay, I saved this part for last because it is my personal favorite part about Donkey Kong Country, the music. There really are some jams to be had here, like the bonus room song, or that intro where Cranky is winding the record player that will have you humming them for days after you play the game. The soundtrack was one of the main reasons I wanted to go back and play this game, and it definitely did not disappoint. It's become one of my favorite soundtracks in all of gaming, and I am happy I got to experience it firsthand. Well, that about wraps things up. Hope you enjoyed the review. I'm not going to give it a score or anything. I don't really like taking everything about a game and boiling it down to just one number. Despite that guy Jane have shown us, it just ends up being very inaccurate and probably does more bad than good. If you're interested, the game is on the Switch Online service, so you can play it for yourself and form your own opinions. I personally had a barrel blast playing the game and writing this review of it, so I'll probably be doing more content like this in the future. If you liked what you saw today, stick around and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hack out.